Hail cheaters! Welcome to the Always Cheating Podcast. My name is Josh L. I'm here with Brandon S.K. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks. I hope you enjoy the podcast we're about to do. Yeah.
Enjoy your stay.
How you doing, Brandon?
I have a question for you, Josh. Halloween is just a few days away.
It is.
If you were going to dress up as any Premier League asset, I'll just call them assets.
Yeah.
Because they're not people to me. They're pawns on a chessboard.
Sure. Yeah.
Who are you going as this Halloween? Who do you think would make the best Halloween costumes?
Well,
certain verbs.
Assuming I don't want to cross any boundaries and get myself in trouble here.
A player who would make sense for you as So I'm a 5'8", stocky build. I mean, Xherdan Shaqiri is probably the kind of comp that would make sense. But if we're looking at, I wish. I mean, he has no neck, but he's pretty built otherwise. You have a Power Cube-esque sort of vibe, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, exactly. At my best, maybe, or worse. I don't know. I would say if I had to pick someone, though, the easiest costume would be Bruno Fernandes, right? Yeah. A true FPL troll this season.
Sure, you could just go around yelling at all of the kids trying to collect candy. You get a kit, you get some big fake teeth, and you and you go around tripping everybody, and then getting mad about people calling you out for it. That's for me, I think it's a bit of a cheat because I basically all I have to do is put on a kit. The rest is already taken care of because people usually tell me I'm like somewhere between a Pau Torres and a Calafiori, in terms of my overall look and my eyes.
Your mane, MEIN, your mane, however you say that word. Yeah,
absolutely. So there we go. You're going as Bruno Fernandes, and I'm going as a hybrid Pau Torres Calafiori.
That's not bad. Yeah, Calafiori. I mean, that's very flattering. I don't know about this.
Halloween, dress up as a hunk. That's my advice.
Yeah, I mean, for years and years, it was always Juan Mata, the player. I always thought he was the handsomest. Yeah. But somehow when he went to Man United, he started to age rapidly.
He really did.
Yeah, he lost the spark.
That club does that to players, I'm noticing.
That's your Bruno. He had perfect teeth when he joined Man United. I would not be making these jokes. So, All right. Well, anyway, so game week 9 in the books, fully in the books. No Monday match this week. No Champions League as well. A little easier to talk about the week that just happened and cast our mind ahead to next week. I mean, there are some League Cup matches in a couple of days, some big ones actually too.
Play the kids.
Yeah. But I thought it was an interesting week. I mean, it felt like the story I guess the story for everybody was Haaland, and there's a lot of debate going into this game week about whether you should triple captain him. And the tension, I think, a little bit was between Southampton, who truly look like one of the weaker clubs that we've seen get promoted in recent years, and they're not even fun in a kind of Ipswichy way, right? Ipswich is this year's Luton Town, like a team that loses in a fun way, right? Like
heroically.
I would never dread watching an Ipswich match, right? I feel like I'm going to have fun no matter what. Same with Luton last year. Whereas with Southampton, it's like, oh man, it's just kind of, and that match was weirdly bad. It was kind of shocking. I mean, the second half of that match, it was like hard to pay attention to it. We had this energy of maybe like in the last 5-10 minutes, it picked up a little bit, but you couldn't stop watching, right? Because you had to see what happened with Haaland, right? Like we had to know how it ended, and I had brought in Gvardiol as well, and so I was sort of like, okay, when are they going to inevitably lose this clean sheet?
The closest they got to that was Cameron Archer right before halftime, where he pinged one off of the crossbar, and that was the moment. That match. We
talked about this though, Brendan. Anyone can hit the crossbar. This is my working theory. You and I should do a crossbar challenge at the end of the season.
Yeah, and then you'll see how hard it actually is. But it was a catalog of catastrophes for Erling Haaland. Yep. I mean, it's just like big chance after big chance that he was flubbing.
Yep.
That this man, he needs to go hang out with Dominic Calvert-Lewin for a while and learn how to head a ball. Haaland cannot head to save his life. It's crazy.
Right. So this was like, wasn't it like the highest XG of his career or something like that? It was like his expected goals were higher than they had been, I think. It was some insane stat that I saw. But just the one goal. I guess it could have been worse, right?
I don't want to. Yeah, I wouldn't want to read too much into it in terms of like, wow, Southampton really showed up, and maybe this will be a pivotal moment for their season. No, Southampton should have got done like 8-0. Right. They were again terrible. It was just the emblematic of Man City's season where they're not playing very well.
Yeah.
However, exactly. they just have the firepower.
Exactly. They can keep. And they keep waxing these like red shirts in the Champions League, right? And so it starts to paint this picture of them like, oh, they're coming back. They just beat, whatever, some random, not to
bologna sandwich from Syria.
There's actually a club called Bologna, which threw me off for a second. There. I was like, oh, did they play Bologna last week? But it was like sort of, but really, it's I don't know. We could talk about the Champions League at some other. Maybe that's more of a Patreon pod discussion. I'm fascinated by this year though, and how it works. Where you have like some of the most exciting Champions League matches I can recall in recent years, and some of the most unwatchable Champions League matches that have ever been played. Sure. It's like this is like the deal they made, right? It's like we're going to have
sounds like every Champions League season, though, right?
I guess that's true. I mean, I guess I'm not really complaining about it. I'm sort of into it. Like it's fine. I don't know. Like it's because I just will watch the good matches, and the other matches just have to happen, right?
Shooter's choice.
Shooter's choice. Exactly.
You only have to watch the game. It's like my mom used to say, only eat what you want.
Yeah.
And if you don't like anything on your plate, go make some peanut butter toast. That was the instruction. So FPL.
I want to hang on this Haaland thing for a second because I think it's interesting, right? Because I have done worse than a triple captain before. So 6 points is by far not the worst return you could have. I had Sadio Mane triple captain in a double game week where I got injured 18 minutes in and I got a 1-pointer, right? And everybody else you could have captained the Liverpool team went off. You probably remember this well. This is 5 years ago or whatever.
Right.
And so these things happen. 6 is not the worst you could see. But I think it was another argument for why I didn't necessarily want to triple captain Haaland this week, which is that I don't think he's in an especially good run of form at the moment. And I don't know why that's sort of irrelevant. Like, I mean, like, yeah, it's like the XG was high, but this is kind of what happens when you're not like overflowing with confidence, right? You don't necessarily just annihilate every chance that you get, right? Sure. You're sort of you overthink it a little bit.
I think triple captainers would have been encouraged by his midweek performance in the much maligned Champions League.
I'm not maligning it. I'm just saying they're red shirts. Okay, I'm saying like you're either playing Bayern Munich or you're playing a club that no one's ever heard of. Like that's the new Champions League.
I would be furious if I triple captained Haaland, but on the other side of the coin, I totally agree with what you're saying in terms of you got an attacking return. You've got to just take it and run with it.
Yeah, and
those
we're
of us
have
who hasn't, like you and I, who have not played our triple captainship, like the future is unknown.
Way fewer double game weeks this year than last year, so we may end up captaining in a single game week ourselves later on.
Here's something fun. What? Do you think that it's a foregone conclusion that there will 100% be a double game week this season?
I think there almost certainly will, right? If only because of the League Cup matches, right? I think those are like the League Cup final will lead to a couple of clubs having double game weeks, and I think that's the one guarantee, even with the FA Cup changes. I mean, this is like a question for people who like I'm not like as great at this as other people. Like I it's not as interesting to me to like try to anticipate the double game weeks. I prefer other people to do the work, and then I can just use their good efforts.
Yeah. I think we'll obviously have to talk this episode a lot about the premium asset roulette that we're playing at this point in the season. But I feel like at this point, I now know a fact. Okay. And the fact is that Cole Palmer is fixture proof, form proof. He's everything proof. Every match Chelsea play, you'll get the exact same Cole Palmer. And you cannot say that about Saka, Salah, or Haaland right now, as like good as they are.
It feels like a weird week to say that, though, because, I mean, last week we got we got a Salah return the last 2 weeks, and Palmer blanked away to Liverpool last week, right? So, I mean, if anything, it feels like Salah would be the one that you'd say is fixture proof.
Well, yeah, that's to me just like, well, I'm not talking about the scoreboard. I'm just talking about watching these matches and the players' confidence and form and positioning and all that, the grass stuff. And I watch Cole Palmer play, and I think this guy is he is able to block out all of those extenuating circumstances where I think Salah, Haaland, and Saka presently are more prone, are just more exposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I do think that Salah it probably deserves to be in that conversation as well. Just maybe it's more of an FPL thing with him, but it just, I mean, they're both on pens. I mean, actually Palmer almost had a pen late in that match. It got, probably rightly. I mean, it was one of those decisions.
Surely rightly.
Yeah. But I was like, maybe to let it go. Yeah, exactly. I was like, maybe
don't
to let
do
it
Dan
go.
Burn like that. Listen, Dan Burn let Dan Burn cook. That's what I'm saying.
6'11" legend. I agree. Yeah. But I think this is what we've been talking about already, which is that, so Saka, Saka, and Palmer all came in with goals and bonus points, right? Together, it was 3 goals and 8 bonus points between them. And Haaland, it speaks to how good he is that there's like an inquest into him after he scores a goal, right? And it comes away with 6 points. We've had years in fantasy where you couldn't pick a single person to trust, right? With captaincies and stuff. So I think it's the theme that I keep thinking about and that I haven't quite figured out how to address unless I just save my transfer again this week and try to get to 3 or I guess maybe take a hit. Although I think you could do it because you still have a wild card. Is I just keep coming back to this idea that there are 4 there are 4 fantasy assets that are fantastic this season, and you should probably just have 3 out of 4 of them. Find a way to get 3 out of 4 of those fantasy assets, right? And I think it's any combination of those. And I feel like there's this this problem that keeps cropping up. We got a lot of questions from listeners this week about how do you pick these forwards? And I think that the problem is most of us have 2 out of 4, and I think that the trick is to try to get 3, and it's not easy, obviously, but I just think that's the way to get around this is to just have these like blue chip stock assets. And so to me, that's sort of my next priority is figuring out how to get and I think for me, I feel like I've got a couple weeks to do it, right? Because you have a couple of tricky fixtures still for Arsenal, right? They play away to Newcastle next week, and then do they play Chelsea the week after that? I think that's.
I've got the fixture ticker right here. Arsenal are away Newcastle, then away Chelsea in game week 11. Then Forest home, and Forest are just continue to be one of the more elite teams in the top.
Super impressive.
The mid-table sides. Yeah, and then it starts getting good again for Arsenal with West Ham, Manchester United at the Emirates, Fulham, Everton, and so on.
Yeah, so I think trying to get to Haaland, Saka, Palmer, or possibly Palmer, Saka, Salah, maybe. I would love to get to that kind of one of those trios, right? And so, are you you are on a green arrow this week? Not a big one, I know, but you're on a green arrow at least. Are you? I think you and I actually might be tied on points now. We are. Yeah, exactly, tied on points.
Yeah, I finished on 63, which is 3 points above my safety score of 60. And I mean, the most painful part of the game week were all the clean sheet wipeouts, which we can touch upon. But I think the main question for me is I wholeheartedly agree. The goal is through free transfers or wild card to get to that 3 premium setup. And it's no question Saka and Palmer are 2 of them. And it then becomes a toss-up between Salah and Haaland. And it just doesn't feel like that big of a leap to say, well, Salah is covering Haaland. And Haaland had his hat tricks at the start of the season. I mean, how far-fetched is that?
It's not far-fetched, but I just think it goes both ways. You could also argue that that Haaland covers Salah. I think it goes both ways. I think that you could either one, right? And I just think it's you can try to split this atom, right, or whatever. Sure. You can try to figure out the right combination of these 4. And I guess what I'm saying to you is I don't think it's something that we can sit here and actually solve, right? And so the only way to kind of address it is to be covered with these three, because they're so far and away. The four of them, right, are so far and away the top fan. Although honestly, I suppose you could argue that Mbeumo is now making Chris
Wooden and Mbeumo are right there with them.
Yeah, but I mean, like, even just looking at the table, you see Haaland is 16 points ahead of Wood in terms of which is amazing that Wood is now second in terms of forward returns. But he's 16 points ahead. Salah and Palmer are way ahead in terms of total points. And Mbeumo and Saka are right behind them. And Mbeumo, it's like with him, it's like you don't even really need to. It's not even a discussion point. You should just have Mbeumo, right? Like he's obviously, he's only 7.7 million. Everyone can get them into their team with ease, and it's only 36.4% owned, which is kind of crazy. And they have a great run ahead too. I mean, Fulham, Bournemouth, Everton, Leicester in the next four. Like those are all extremely startable. I mean, that Leicester fixture in game week 13, and we'll have to look. We can look ahead to that later on in in a future pod, but possibly a captainable fixture for him, given what he's been doing against these some of the bottom half of the table clubs.
Yeah. So, but the triumvirate of premium assets, the Salah versus Haaland thing, if we have nothing to say about who is better amongst these four premium guys, how can we justify having the most expensive guy in Erling Haaland?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Just that he is the best player on the best team, and the entire Man City attack was funneled around creating chances for him. I mean, that's the rationale, right? Whereas Liverpool have a number of guys who can score, and Man City seem to only have Haaland. Right. I mean, you brought in Foden. Like, what did you like? Obviously, he blanked, but I mean, like, what did you think about his performance in the match?
I thought his performance was very good.
Yep.
I thought he played very central. He played exactly where you would want him to play as a fantasy owner, and he actually created an incredible chance for Haaland near the end of the match that Haaland completely fluffed, 1-on-1 with the keeper, and he's on corners. Foden is. So there are lots of avenues to points, given all the injuries that are City are dealing with right now. I mean, I expect that they'll have more players to choose from in a week's time, but it still feels like a good pick. It again, just it's very frustrating to be throwing these fantasy darts and sort of just never knowing which one is going to hit week to week. I mean, there were players that were languishing for months in fantasy that came good this week. And you're trying to sort of break the mold with somebody like Foden, and I think Foden is going to come good for people who have him in the coming weeks, and that's just as hopeful.
Yeah, I mean, so are you you still have a wild card, which I think puts you in a unique position where kind of every week now there's a little bit of a debate over whether this is the time to finally pull the trigger. And so, I mean, did you feel a little more persuaded to push the button? I mean, basically, I guess I'm curious. I was arguing that you kind of want to have three of these four, kind of pick. And I'm sort of with you. I think that Saka and Palmer make sense, especially because they're so much cheaper than Haaland and Salah. Right. But but the easiest way to do it, obviously, is to be on a wild card where you can sort of, it's just a lot easier to free up the money and rotate things around and maybe look ahead to the next few weeks and say, okay, I can get by with these. Like with Everton having some cheap defensive assets, for example, right? I can get by with a 4.3 million defender.
Well, the two main guys who I don't have are Saka and Palmer, and game week 12 is the big inflection point for both clubs. Yep. Chelsea could absolutely murder Manchester United in game week 10, and I'll have to prepare myself for that. There is a temptation to just go for Palmer before that fixture, but Salah are home Brighton. I mean, that's probably a lower scoring match than the Manchester United match. But for the wild card, I kind of know what the team is going to look like. Yeah. It's just a matter of when do I want to have that team, because I look at my present team and I still have players that have been good servants for me and have been getting me points, but they're just sort of been a rolling boil. Nothing's really spilled over, like Smith Rowe and Rogers and Delap even. Havertz is probably Havertz and Porro are my enemies this week, where like the edge players who I have had against the field have let me down the last couple of weeks. So, but I don't want a wild card just to punish those edge guys and reshape my team, because I feel like as much as I know particular facts, like Palmer, you have to have him. Chris Wood should be in virtually every team. I still feel like I want to know even more before I could optimize a wild card. Now that is probably being too egg-headed for fantasy, like just play it dummy and get it over with, that sort of a thing. But I still feel like I wonder if there's going to be a moment in the coming month where suddenly we know a little bit more, or there's some sort of cataclysmic injury, God forbid. Because I just don't know how big of a gain the wild card is in just the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a good rule of thumb. And if you look at your team for any particular week, and why don't you do it? Why don't you pull up your team for game week 10, Brandon, and we'll discuss it. We'll this will not just be for the visual for the visual learners, Brandon. There's also the audio listener, so we will keep that in mind. But just looking at your squad for game week 10 here, I see Mikalenko, Robinson, Porro, maybe one clean sheet there, like you could consider it, right? But your midfield looks good. Smith Rowe and Mbeumo, Foden. I mean, that Bournemouth match is like an interesting one now for Man City, right? Like you would expect them to win that match, but just given the struggles they had, like away to Wolves a couple weeks ago, I don't know if that's an easy match. Like I actually wonder if because you have Salah in your squad, would you give any thought to captaining Salah at home to Brighton over Haaland away to Bournemouth?
Yeah, certainly. It's a coin flip between those two. I do think if I had Cole Palmer, I'd be captaining him this week, and that's
away to Man United.
Yep, and that is a potential transfer that I'm thinking about, just to get ahead of that one, and maybe even just like postpone a wild card until the festive fixtures even. Because I spent 2 transfers this week. I moved Saliba out for Mikalenko, and I brought Phil Foden in for Anthony Gordon. So one free transfer. I just think getting ahead of that 3 premium discussion that we're having in Salah to Cole Palmer, and then to be able to captain him, because I agree with you. I'm not sure how high Haaland's ceiling is against a very organized Bournemouth team at home. I mean, just looking at my bus team here, it is very recency bias, and I'd be curious to have this conversation with Spurs fans over the course of this week. But that was one of the more unimpressive performances I've seen this season. Spurs away at Crystal Palace this weekend, and it's just continuing.
We'll give Palace some credit too, because I thought they did play well today. I thought they really they went for it.
They did, and but you can't really get around the fact that the form that this Palace team has been in, and everything that Ange is asking from his team and expecting of his team, and to do what they did there. I just don't know enough about the intricacy of Spurs tactics to understand quite what went wrong there. But Aston Villa, I think like. Konsa definitely deserves consideration. I'm doing this right now on the YouTube. Konsa in for Pedro Porro. I mean, Porro, he still has all of those arrows in his quiver of being on set pieces and corners and whatnot, but it's just a bit of a shambles. I feel like with Spurs, Ange is such a zealot, and that's like the perk of Ange. Like that's what you like about Ange. He's a zealot, and he knows exactly what he wants to do. Yeah. And you could argue that's way better than having a manager like Ten Hag, who has no earthly idea what he wants to do. The problem is what Ange wants to do requires that they don't make half as many mistakes as they make during a match, and that he just has a few better players. So I fear that Spurs are just in a bad situation where they got out of form players and players that just aren't really up for what Ange needs them to do.
Yeah, it was. I mean, obviously they didn't have Son today, and that was a factor. But yeah, it was a weird one. I mean, I sort of plugged my team into review earlier today too, just to see what the suggested moves were. And one of them was basically all of them involved taking Haaland out. And
tell me it's not Solanke. Like these algorithms need to be taken to the outback.
That's exactly where I'm going, because it's sort of on the one hand there's like an argument for it, but on the other hand, if you just watch I'm a little like I was thinking, I was like, God, like is Ange in trouble here? Like they're just so up and down. It's such a I don't think he really is. Like I don't know. I don't know. It's really tough, right? It's like, can we just sit here and say confidently that if you just brought in Potter or something like that, it would like totally turn things around for Spurs? I mean, it's,
no. I think it's a squad issue for sure, and I would support the view that Ange needs a couple more transfer windows to continue shaping the squad, but he's just in a rough patch, and the squad is just not the right alchemy at the moment.
And too many players that run hot and cold, in my opinion. Yeah. Like I really feel like, and I know this is like he's like my Richarlison, like you're the way you like, but I just like Madison just drives me crazy because I just feel like he drifts in and out of matches, and there's like days, it's like he's either good or really bad. And there's just sort of, you never know what you're going to get with him every day. And it's just really hard to build a consistently strong team when one player is so inconsistent all the time. Right. And that's what I feel like you get with him. And I won't say that for Son. His son is always, he always is absolutely trying his hardest out there. And so he's sort of the exception, but Son is, I think he might be 33 now. Like he which is not old exactly, but it's like he gets the kind of like, these are the kind of injuries you start to get when you get into your 30s, right? It's like he's 32, excuse me. So these are the kind of things that like KDB is going through this as well, right? It's just really hard to build a consistent team around a squad of people that are in their 30s. They're just going to they're going to get muscle injuries and recurring. I mean, I don't know about you, Brandon. I didn't even know I had hamstrings until the last year or two. Okay. They had never been a thing I had ever thought about or considered. And now I am obsessed with stretching my hamstrings because they ache if I don't. And this is this is the kind of like random crap that happens as you get older. So anyway, all right, well, let's go back to fantasy. So you're a little on the fence still. I think that makes sense. I mean, I don't think you can move Salah to Palmer. I doubt you actually would do that in the end.
Why not?
Because well, I mean, I think Salah's probably the best captain option for this week. I don't really Salah at home. He's consistently spectacular, has been for many, many, many seasons. Palmer away to Man United. I mean, Man United have been dreadful, but I still think it's just a tricky away match. I don't really know. I mean, like we just saw Palmer last season. I mean, I don't put too much stock in that kind of like one-off thing. I mean, like but like a week ago, he was in a difficult away match and blanked. Right? It's granted, it's an easier opposition, but like I don't know. I think it's more likely that Palmer blanks than Salah doesn't get an attacking return. Like that's but that's my feeling. I didn't know you were like so hardcore all in on Cole Palmer all of a sudden. This is like I was also impressed with him today though. I agree with you. I think he was I think he's an excellent buy in fantasy.
Yeah, but it really does, like as basically as the theme of this podcast. It just all kind of revolves around testing your mettle with these big premium guys, and then even as insanely good as Chris Wood has been, I'm not getting him until I wild card. It's just not happening, and it's kind of like a game of chicken with him. Still, and I will happily get him when I play my wild card. It feels like still the flip of a coin any given week where, looking at my team like Delap or Havertz could equal him. I mean, Delap coming off the bench this weekend almost equaled Chris Wood in points.
Do you agree with my 3 out of 4 theory, or do you think I'm like do you think I'm crazy? Like, is there a
I think Yes, I think it's painfully obvious.
Yeah, okay, good, because that's how I feel too. I think that, well, of course, much like as often happens in this pod, you and I have an idea that we've been advocating for several episodes, and we have not personally done it. but
it takes some doing, as you say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and especially if you don't have a wild card, and I think the people who wild carded, I guess in game week 6, maybe we were close to this strategy, and I think. It's just over the last 4 game weeks have proven that there are simply no half measures when it comes to a season like this. You kind of just have to go all out for it and let the guys on the periphery land where they may.
I will say, in your specific situation where you have Havertz, away to Newcastle, I guess it just really depends on what you want to do personally with Salah. But, if you were to wild card this week, if you really wanted to have Palmer, then it wouldn't be that hard just to go like Havertz to Wood, Foden to Palmer, right? I think you might actually be able to, or I guess that could be a -4. But like if you're at that point, you could just basically do a game week 12 wild card a couple of weeks early, basically. And it just depends on whether, again, if you're going to go with that 3 out of 4. Idea is that third player going to be Haaland or Saka? And it is a tricky question. It's hard to answer.
Yeah, I like the Newcastle fixture for Havertz on Arsenal v Liverpool blockbuster Sunday. I had Liverpool like stone cold 2-1. Liverpool are going to win this. I just think that the players are motivated. Slot's got a good thing going, and Arsenal were in a weird place. And yet again, Arteta and his lads played well. They played up to the occasion, and the match could have gone either way. Like if you're a Liverpool fan, you'd say maybe we could have won. Arsenal fans say the same thing, but I don't think Newcastle are at it at all right now. They played decently against Chelsea, but Chelsea really was having their way for the most part. If they were a little more clinical, they would have probably blown Newcastle away. So Havertz v Newcastle feels good to me. The Salah to Palmer thing really is a captaincy question, and I think then that is like this more the added layer of difficulty with this 3 out of 4 premium asset strategy is then how do you share the captaincy armband around, and how do you weigh what you think their chances are. Yeah. And I don't disagree. Salah at home at Anfield is always a good fantasy fixture, but I do feel like Palmer's ceiling is like twice as high as Salah's. That's my personal read on
Well, it's an interesting argument for just kind of picking one and just that's honestly how I feel a little bit with Haaland, right? It's just like I'm sure you got to weather the rough patches, and you just sort of pick the same guy every time, and it's just outside of obvious circumstances, right, where he's got an especially tricky match, and someone else is, Palmer has a great home match or something like that. But yeah, so I think it is tricky. I mean, I guess I'm still, maybe I'm just I feel like I'm kind of going down with the ship with Haaland. And that's just sort of where I'm at. And maybe I'll change my mind at some point. But I just feel like it's like this sort of like I just feel like it's just, to me, it still remains as simple as, I do think that Man City are the best team. I think ultimately they're going to win the Premier League this year. I think that they have one player who can score goals, and that's Haaland. And all Pep should be focused on is finding more chances for Haaland to score goals, right? And so if I view it through that lens, I just think, well, eventually he's going to hit another great run of form.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. I mean, do you want to take a look at your team and talk about decisions that you have coming up?
Sure. Let's do it. Yeah, for once, I feel like I haven't shared my team in weeks, Brendan. I'm turning into one of those people. I had the FPL gods finally rewarded me for some epic complaining. So I'm glad that. This is my team for next week. We don't need to talk about that right now. Let's talk about that some other time, Brandon. Okay. So I'm on 74 points this week. Really, honestly, a fantastic week. And the only thing that really went wrong was everything involving Aston Villa, right up into the kind of crushing blow of Konsa going from 9 points to 2 points in the the waning seconds of their match, where that was just shocking to me. I really did. Like I honestly, I wasn't even personally watching the last 5 minutes of that match. I was we had like our block party this weekend, and I was like, oh well, this is settled, because the match was over. It ended after the Man City match, and it was. And then I looked, a few minutes later, and I was like, "Wait, 1-1? Like, how did the, And so, yeah, that lose 7 points at the death like that was pretty tough. But otherwise, really strong week. Vardial with 9, so got kind of lucky there to finally pick up a Man City defender when they finally kept a clean sheet. And Mbeumo with the brace, a kind of funny brace, right? Because the second goal was a. It actually reminded me of a goal that Stuart Dallas scored for Leeds a few seasons ago, where just the cross in and it just evades both clubs. It's like 15 people. It goes over everybody's head, and then
it's like watching a slow-mo spiral football at the end of Friday Night Lights.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody knows where it's going to land, and there it is in the goal.
Still wonder if the keeper could have done a little bit better there, but regardless, it was.
It's not a banner year in the Premier League for goalkeeping. I'll say that.
Truly not. But it was great. I mean, so 15 points from him. He's just been incredible fantasy asset. Really consistent the entire season too. It's funny because we thought he was too expensive to start the year, and even though we rated him, it just felt like he might be a little too expensive. And now it feels like he's one of the more underpriced assets in the game, right? Like I feel like. You talked about this maybe in last week's pod, but he's one of those guys where if his price was like 10 million, like we'd all be considering captaining him more often for these fixtures, right? Mm-hmm. And there's something because he's 7.5, there's like some mental hurdle you've got to get over where you have all these expensive players, and it feels weird to captain the 7 million guy. But he's obviously been performing like a premium asset the entire season in fantasy. He's been great.
The odd thing about Mbeumo is he doesn't have a single assist this season. 8 goals, no assists. It's very strange to me.
For a winger, right? Exactly. It's really strange. Or even just like a shot that the keeper,
parries away.
Yeah, parries away that somebody slots in, right? Like same thing with Chris Wood, actually. That may be a little less surprising in his case, but he's got 7 goals and 0 assists. Where are the assists this season, Brandon?
There's one-dimensional players, these guys.
Who's got the assist? That's what everybody's asking. I think Vardy, 2 goals in 2 matches now make me feel a little bit better about what felt like a kind of terrible transfer at the time, and now has sort of redeemed itself. And they play Ipswich in game week 10, so this might be the farewell match for me and Vardy, but at least I get one more strong match. And then the man himself, Cole Palmer, with 10 points, and then Eze I felt good about too, because I couldn't figure out where to put that transfer. You and I talked on Thursday, and I felt like I wanted to drop him, but no move made sense. Like it was, sometimes you just can't. I just wasn't going to force it, right? And it was I was like, oh, maybe Bryan Johnson, but then I just worried a little bit about what the Spurs attack would look like without Son coming off the Europa League, and I think we saw that a little bit on today's match, and so I just sort of stuck him in there, and I thought, well, I don't know. Like, I'll put my faith in the underlying stat gods, and maybe he'll get. So it was actually quite a nice assist. I mean, I assume he meant to do that as an assist.
Certainly,
sort of play off. Yeah. Almost scored too. Had an marginally offside goal. So So just a nice week all in all. And as someone who didn't captain Haaland or triple captain Haaland, that is the 6-point return was kind of perfect, right? Like it was like you get a little something, but then it's not like. I don't know about you. I was kind of rooting against him to score more than one goal.
Get out of here. Match. No.
Yeah.
No, I want more. Give me more points.
Did you really? Oh, I didn't. I mean, 300,000 managers triple captain him, including some people in our mini leagues. Like, I wanted no part of more Haaland goals. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I moved up about 900,000 spots too, which was great. So, so I'm feeling good about my squad. I've got 2 transfers now going into next week, and I really don't know what I'm going to do, but I think I'm going to try to actually back up what I'm preaching in this podcast, which is to try to figure out a strategy for getting a third fantasy asset. What I think I want to do is get Saka ahead of game week 12. So very, very similar strategy to you, I think. And I think for me, I'm just going to opt for Haaland over Salah. And I just think it's really hard to have, I guess this is like the argument for why you'd kind of have to rejigger things a little bit. And it's like, I think if you're wild carding, it does put you in the spot where you're going to have to make a decision between those two assets. And it's just not easy, right? It's really hard to pick between the two of them. Because they both have, and I think you do kind of have to, because that extra, the 2 million jump from Palmer to Salah, for example, right? That really does make some, like, it forces some big changes, I think, in your squad, right? Like that changes the defenders that you can field, the strength of your bench, stuff like that.
I'll tell you right now, there's no way that Cole Palmer doesn't have more points than Mo Salah by the end of the season. So I don't. I'm not putting any stock in that. It just feels like, I think Salah is not worth the extra 2. And if you're going for Haaland, it's just as discussed. It's like Palmer plus Saka plus one or the other between Haaland and Salah.
Okay, yeah. So that's where I am. Let's see if there's any other things I wanted to talk about from Game Week 9. I think we can move on here, Brandon. Let's do a quick shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. If you would like to support the podcast, say thank you for doing one free podcast each week for everybody. And you want to get a second podcast, usually a little looser. Although this last one, Brandon, there was for the people who think I complain too much, Brandon, that podcast was that one was a banner. It was a banner pod for Josh Landon complaining. It really was. And so if you want more of that, although we don't do that. I mean, usually it's a pretty cheerful pod, I would say. When you say the Patreon pods are like a more kind of laid back sort of
tend to be, for sure.
So anyway, if you, but also of course we preview. In an actual serious way, the game week ahead of us as well. And usually we'll have some information about injury news and press conferences and things like that. So if you want that, and you also want access to the Discord and contests that we run in the Patreon League, things like that, you can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating to support the podcast. Once again, that's patreon.com/alwayscheating. Brandon, should we go ahead and start talking about Game Week 10 a little bit? We have some good questions here. Oh, my
God. It's like you're already putting up the Christmas decorations. You want to start talking about Game Week 10. Okay. All right. That's fine. Are we going to have a daylight savings for Game Week 10? I think that in the U.S. happens on the 3rd. Yeah,
we are, my friend.
Sunday.
Yeah.
So we're having that on the Sunday of Game Week 10. Cool.
Yeah. Did you have anything else there? Yeah, I love that.
Just, my Farmer's Almanac corner. Cue the jingle.
Yeah, but Ben Franklin over here with his.
That's, next time I'm tying a key to a kite, all of a sudden to figure out who I'm going to transfer in next week.
I love the Saturdays because, again, it's in general, I think it's great. We did it ourselves. We got up and went to a bar at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning a couple weeks ago when you were in town. But I also really love when the matches on Saturday started at 11 a.m. instead of 10 a.m. When the final match is at a leisurely 1:30. My goodness, Brandon, you could go to lunch with your family. If your mother and father were in town, you could take them out for a nice lunch, have dessert, and come back and watch, what's got to be the game of the week, right? Wolves Crystal Palace. They're sticking some real doozies in the final match of Saturday window of the last couple of weeks. It's interesting. What did you think about the Fulham Everton match? Did you watch the whole thing? It was
I did. Entertaining match for sure. I was screaming at the television for like the last 15 minutes because Fulham could not manage that game to save their life. It was just like, hold the ball. Like putting Harry Wilson in to manage the end of a game is like the dumbest decision I can imagine a manager making. Such as the squad that Silva has frankly brilliantly made, but he's got just a bunch of like attacking guys who don't really have a whole lot of nous. Iwobi was magnificent in that game, and the bigger concern going in was what's going on with Smith Rowe, and he did have a good game as well. But you could just sense that Everton goal was coming as Fulham looked completely depleted of fuel with like 5 to 10 minutes to go.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, like you got to feel like you're kind of fine with Smith Rowe, right? He's sort of given his price. I mean, he's still around 5.5 million roughly, right? I mean, you're getting. Honestly, obviously, like you want every fantasy asset to deliver all the time. That's like, that's just like the hope. But I think for what he is, I think he's honestly turned into quite a good asset. I mean, I brought in Semenyo, and Semenyo is sort of like he might win the Lively battle a little more than Smith Rowe, but Smith Rowe is the one who's been getting the returns more consistently.
Yeah, and Smith Rowe playing a little bit more centrally, and against Everton, he was back to his like box crashing best that you saw occasionally at Arsenal. And Fulham are just a better team than Bournemouth in terms of like. Qualified by Fulham are a better fantasy team. Fulham are going to go for it, whereas Bournemouth are going to be a little bit maybe more tactically adept in that sense. And this is the concern with Fulham, where they can just like blow it as they have done in the last moments of the game, where Bournemouth maybe less so, but in so doing become less charged as fantasy assets, like you're saying with Semenyo.
Yeah, so I think it's a fun weekend ahead. A little bit of an FPL classic, I'd say, Brandon, with the big Saturday, the 2 Sunday, and the fun Monday. I don't know. Like I actually don't really know quite what to do with Robinson for this match. In general, I think he's a good start in any Fulham home fixture, but given the form that we've seen with Mbeumo, it does worry me a little bit. And could we ever get another attacking return from Robinson, or was that just a fluke that assist?
He was very attacking against Everton for sure, but his final ball is definitely eluding him the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. I think one thing that's interesting is I think we are seeing now with Southampton and Ipswich that they are two teams that you really truly want to try and target if you can, right? Like you want to target those fixtures. And I mean, Ipswich for slightly different reasons than Southampton. I mean, Southampton, it's more like, it just feels like it's incredibly hard for them to score. Like there's just they just don't really have anybody that can sort of do a Jamie Vardy-ish job, right, where they just sort of get a ball in the right spot and can score. And I think with Ipswich, it just doesn't feel like they can hold anybody to a clean sheet, right? And so slightly different kind of maybe like ways to target them. However, with that said, I think this week is a little bit tricky. I mean, Leicester. I did watch the Leicester match. It was Friday, so it was a little easier to watch it maybe, but. I thought that Buonanotte was really impressive. I don't really know that he's like an amazing fantasy asset, but there are some, like Mavadidi's not bad either. Like this team, I think Leicester are going to find a way to stay up. Like they're like James Justin is good. Like there's enough good in this team and enough bad in several other teams in the Premier League that I think they might stay up with like 31 points, right? It may be like 18th, or whatever it is, 17th place, just by a couple. But there is some like proper Premier League talent in this squad for sure.
Yeah, I wonder if Wolves will have the final say there, because it's not like I don't see Leicester beating any of the teams above them in the table right now. I think Everton are gaining steam. And then it's really Palace and Wolves. Like, are they just going to flip the switch?
And Palace have too much talent, I think. Like I think we saw it in that Spurs match today. Like there's a lot of good in that team. It's like it hasn't really come together yet, but their attack is fine, right? I mean, it's like Mateta, Sarr, I thought was really good today too. As had a lot of nice moments. Like that team when they're kind of connecting is really solid, and their defense is solid as well. Like it's kind of inexplicable to me that they had such a rough start to the season, because and maybe it was just replacing Elise and just getting used to it. But like to me, they're like, I'd say it's more likely they finish top half of the table than they finish in a real relegation battle. That's maybe they just got too bad of a start that they could like that. Something like 9th is out of the question now. But like I think like they finished like in that 10 to 12 zone this year.
Okay, so interesting calls. It feels like a lot of this could be a good game week for marginal characters. Like as you were saying, like I benched Delap in game week 9, partly because there were rumors that he was going to be benched IRL. And also, I just didn't love the fixture for them. But when he came off the bench, he looked amazing. And home against Leicester, that's great. And I agree. The same could be said for Vardy in that fixture. The tougher call is suddenly, it's like the reverse of the first half of this episode, is like, now which premium guy is going to be the man this week. So let's go back to the whole theme of the quad. The quad. Let's call him the quad. It's like, to use a Succession reference. Who of the quad is going to really do it this week?
Who of the quad? Well, okay. So we've got, we talked about I guess the only player we didn't really talk about earlier was Saka, right? He comes back and it's,
like old times.
It's like old times. Yeah, he's got the like kind of like a little bit of like a non-celebration celebration. I suppose of the four, he has what I would think would be the weakest fixture, slimmest chances of doing something this weekend. I will say personally, if I had Salah, and I genuinely mean this, if I had Salah, I would give a strong consideration to captaining him over Haaland this week. I don't know. There's like we saw it again in the Southampton match. Like there's no way that Man City should be winning a match like that 1-0, right? Like and sure, you can talk about great XG all you want, but like still, like I just think that
that would be a great sequel to Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Yeah. The sequel, Great XG.
Yeah, by Charles Dixon.
By Charles Dixon, yeah. Lee Dixon.
Lee Dixon's Great XG. That's funny.
I couldn't think of a man least likely to think about XG than Lee Dixon. But anyway,
that's true.
We digress.
That's true. I kind of want to see that like mocked up book cover though now. So So I think that I don't know. Brighton. It really was the weekend of heartbreaking late. I mean, the Brighton one was crazy because not only they conceded twice. I think they were both after the 86th minute in that match too. It's insane. Really? Along with Fulham, obviously too, and Aston Villa. So I don't know. Like Brighton just they still seem a little. They're a more fun version. Like they're a more fun team this year for sure. But I do think that there's. I don't know. They're going to concede a couple goals in this match, I think. And whereas I just don't quite know what we're going to get out of Man City, right? And it's that little bit of anxiety that leads me to think that Salah might be a slightly better captain pick. And then I think Palmer's fine too. I don't know. I like all three, really. I mean, Haaland is Haaland. So I don't really know how we're supposed to kind of split this either, right? Like this is again. I mean, like is it? Should we be trying to like figure this out? Like, is there some number crunching that we're supposed to be doing here?
You can try.
Yeah, you can. You could try, but like,
it's not going to work.
Yes, exactly. And so, I mean, I think you can do what I think, like, whether you're a gambling person or not. Like, I know a lot of people really, especially people in the UK, really dislike gambling. But like, I think you can just look at the anytime goal scoring odds sometimes too. And I think that there's like, if only because those are generated through numbers, right? It's not like a guy with a sheet of paper and a pencil, like sort of, the bookie is not like it's not Robert De Niro in Casino anymore, right? It's like, it's just, it's like a bunch of like,
he was running the beverage program. We all know that it was all above board. Okay.
That's true. That's true. And that, and I still think that, that car that exploded, that was just a faulty plate in that car.
100%. You can't pin
no
that
one
on
was
anyone.
No one was trying to do anything there. Yeah. The Joe Pesci thing, I don't know. That one was trickier, but
wrong place, wrong time.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Wrong
exactly.
cornfield, wrong time.
Wrong cornfield, wrong time. We've all been there. Yeah. So I think, but I think like, it's basically a bunch of quants who like punch up numbers. Right. And so, I do think that, that can be like a little bit of a default. The only problem is they always say that Haaland is the like far and away, like best chance of scoring. So you can look at, like our friend Dave likes to look at multiple goals, like the odds of scoring 2 or more goals in a match. And I think that's an interesting, thing to look at. You can look at to score assist if that's a market that's available. You and I have been talking about this more in our Patreon pods, but those are markets that they don't always offer for some of these games. And Salah does sort of can get equal to Haaland, right? If you consider goal and assist. I don't know. What do you think about Darwin Nunez today in the Liverpool match?
I think he's grown into, after basically not being able to get a minute at the start of the season under Slot. I feel like he's kind of found his role. And I agree. Do like it for this Liverpool team right now.
Yeah, me too. I've done a little bit of I feel like all of us, whether you're a fantasy person or not, we've all gone through the roller coaster with Darwin over the last couple of years. And but now it's like we've emerged with more understanding. You know, we've sort of come out the old.
I'll never invite him to dinner, but no, I'm happy for him.
Exactly. Our expectations will never be as high as they were a couple of years ago, but we understand him now. Yeah. I think that just an interesting question is moving beyond the captaincy, are there I don't know, is this a week? It's interesting. I haven't really thought about this before for the pod, but there are some weeks where your team picks itself, right? And there's some weeks where there's a great match or a difficult benching decision or something like that, where you have to really force yourself into a tight corner. I will say at the moment, before I make any transfers, my team kind of picks itself. And I think partially that's because there isn't one utterly spectacular fixture this weekend, right? Where there's one team hosting another team and that team is way better, or even a team on the road against, a team away. Sometimes that's actually great. Sometimes you want Man City to be at Ipswich, right? Because Ipswich might feel compelled to sort of put on a show for their home supporters and actually try to do something, right? Not just completely, set up, park the bus or whatever. And sometimes actually, it's actually you're more likely to get attacking returns in a match like that than you are if Man City are at home. But I think for this particular game week, I mean, you might be right. It could be Chelsea away, but I think that says something about this game week if one of the better opportunities is Chelsea at Old Trafford, right? And I don't know, do you see any other just amazing one team's going to destroy the other fixture in game week 10? No,
I don't. I do think that Newcastle could get exposed by Arsenal, but I agree to what fantasy end I wouldn't gamble on Arsenal scoring more than 2.5 goals at all.
Yeah.
The fixture that is really vexing me fantasy wise is Spurs hosting Aston Villa, and I am feeling overinvested in Villa and Spurs just looking at that fixture, because that just seems like a vast fantasy wasteland, that fixture, where it's I can't imagine either team keeping a clean sheet, nor can I imagine any of my Villa or Spurs assets getting any attacking returns at the same time. So I'm just I'm struggling to sort of find what I expect to happen in that match.
I know. I feel that way a little bit too. I mean, especially because of the Bournemouth match, really threw me for a loop a little bit. I was not expecting a 1-1 draw there, and it makes me wonder. Morgan Rogers went off early. I mean, is this the week where they try a Duran Watkins combo from the start? I don't know. Not that I'm not as worried about Rogers' place in the squad long term, but just mix it up a little bit.
It could be. It felt like load management maybe for Rogers. He's started every game, even in Europe for Aston Villa, and just given how open Spurs can be in the midfield, it feels like a match in which a player like Rodgers could feast. And I'd like him for this match. I was actually shifting my bus team around while you were talking and moving Rodgers back into my starting 11, and I just kind of feels like it may be a 1-1 or a 2-2 sort of a free-for-all sort of a match.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think if you view through that lens, you could also just start Porro, right? And just it's so interesting. It really we're going through the Porro thing just like we did last season, right? Where it's he has these he feels like he has these stretches where he's just an amazing fantasy asset, and then you just get a bunch of ones and zeros from him for a while.
Right.
All right. Well, you want to take a couple questions, Brendan, as we wrap things up here?
Yes,
let's do it. All right. So Jimmy Rogdog Town says, Feels like some rage moves are incoming this week. It says, well, which moves are reasonable and which ones should we take a deep breath on? And so he says Tottenham assets, Trent, Haaland, Foden, Arsenal defense, probably some other assets too. So let's just do the lightning round style, Brandon. Spurs assets. If you have any Spurs assets right now, would you be looking to move them on ahead of this Villa match?
The Spurs asset that worries me the most is Solanke, because he's just all he does is hold up play for Spurs, and they can't figure out how to involve him in the attack in any other meaningful way. And you're just like, is this guy going to score a single goal all season? I'm not sure. Yep. So he worries me. Trent does seem like somewhat overvalued in the game at the moment. I think it's kind of like, how long are you willing to wait? Because Trent will come good at some point. But, if you're talking about this tripling up on the premium assets, I mean, your team, Josh, is Trent going to have to be a part of that long-term move to Saka?
I almost surely, right? I mean, it's the easiest way to free up like 3 million. And so, I think so. I mean, it could happen as soon as this week, honestly. I don't, but again, I don't know that I will, because the reason I would do it will be to probably get Saka, and this doesn't feel like the week where I need to drop Trent to fund a Saka. It's like that could just wait another week or two. So I'm not actually sure what I'll do. This could be a week where I end up having 3 transfers for the first time ever. I'm sort of, I want to be part of that camp once, Brendan. I do want to be part of the 3 transfer crew. Have you been? I forget. Have you had a 3 transfer week yet?
I don't recall. Maybe. I'm not
sure. If I beat you to having 3 transfers in a game week, that will be one of the upsets of the season. It really would be shocking. Deal. Yeah.
Put it in the paper. All right. Haaland and Foden, obviously not. And my feelings on Foden is, I thought he looked great this weekend. Just sadly, no fantasy returns, but he should have had fantasy returns. Arsenal defense, I don't know. It does, if it is part of a move to get another premium guy, I support it. If it's just because you're angry at Arsenal not keeping clean sheets recently, I disagree with it. I think it's a waste of a transfer.
Yeah, I think it's a waste of a transfer too. I mean, I guess, is there any Gabriel news or updates?
Not that I saw, no.
Yeah, so that, probably fine, but let's.
I'm sure Mikel Arteta will be very transparent in the coming week.
Yeah. So we'll see. Arsenal are still waiting to learn the extent of the Gabriel and Timber injuries. Gosh, it's just anyway. I don't know. I don't want to get off the fantasy track too much here, Brandon. I'm always tempted. I'm always right on the cusp of just completely just talking about the Premier League, and but I want to let's stay focused here. Okay, let's do a couple more questions, though. GPS, how many goals do Welbeck and Wood need to score to break into the template?
Well, Wood is there. I think he's done enough. And Welbeck, off the back, pardon the pun, off the back of him seemingly breaking his back last game week, comes back and looks better and better than ever. I don't know. I'm astounded by what he's doing. I think the thing you'd say then about Welbeck versus Wood is Forest just feel like they're on steadier footing. It's just like performance after performance. They're replicating what it is they set out to do. And Brighton are more mercurial. And that's the one worry or the one flag with Welbeck is this going to be the week that Brighton are just bad?
Yeah, because I think, to me, Welbeck is a very known commodity. It's hard for me to believe at 32 or whatever, he suddenly found another.
You're so ageist on this podcast.
I really am. I'm older than all these people, so I feel like I'm allowed to do it. It's if I was punching up or something, then I'd feel worse about it. But I'm definitely punching down. I was talking about my hamstrings earlier. Clearly, I'm part of this camp. And so, whereas I think that Chris Wood is in a slightly different category because. He's kind of been super consistent, and he's
32 years old. Chris Wood,
is he really? Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. What's gonna be hilarious is Danny Welbeck older than Chris Wood? Who is older between the two of them? Or are you just making that up? Is that true?
No, I know. It's a true fact stated. Danny Welbeck is 33 years old.
Okay, phew. Okay, well, I mean, 33 is totally different than 32, Brandon. I mean, that's the Jesus year, isn't it? 33.
It is.
I mean,
So Welbeck will be lucky to live out the rest of the season.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, I guess Wood to me has not battled form and injuries at the level that Welbeck has over the years. And Welbeck is such a crazy ride, right? I mean, like, you forget he was at Arsenal for multiple seasons, right? Sure. It's like, so I do think that whereas Chris Wood is a super consistent, like, see ball in box hit ball, right? And it's like it feels like Forrest have maybe I don't know, maybe he's like leveled up. I mean, who knows, right? Like, maybe that advanced stats, like, people have gotten into his head and helped him by who knows. I don't actually know what's kind of feeling this change, but it doesn't feel like as much of a leap to be like, oh, take a goal scorer consistently scored 10 to 12 goals a season, like, make a couple of light adjustments, and that can suddenly turn into a 15 to 17 goal forward, right? If things kind of go well. And I think that's, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's sustainable, but, like, it doesn't feel crazy to me. It doesn't feel like Chris Wood is, like, doing something that, like, he could not replicate more or less throughout the I don't think he's going to score 25 goals, right? But I think he could score 16 goals this year. I don't think that would be insane.
Well, the first goal he scored against Leicester on Friday night, it was something that Spurs fans would love to see Solanke do, because Solanke is doing nothing but receiving the ball with his back to goal. Chris Wood receives the ball with his back to goal and does this sensational pirouette, turn and shoot in one fluid motion. Yep. And the way that, like, just watching that motion, you're just like, this guy is in full flow this season.
Yeah. Yeah. He kind of has been from the start, right? It's like, I mean, even right at the very beginning, he was great. So, so I think that I think I'm with you. But are you kind of with me on Welbeck? Just like, I can't quite get there with Danny.
Yep.
All right. So, okay, we've got one final question here, Ren, because I think we've covered almost everything else in these questions. Boston Prof asks, what is the ideal forward line? This is kind of connected to the Wood discussion. What is the ideal forward line, all things considered? There's such great choices at all prices. Almost tempted to do a Wood, Raul, Cunha line, but Vissa and Jackson are great too. Almost too many to want to have Haaland. So if you were to go, let's say you wildcarded in game week 12, right? And you were to go with the super size, big in the middle, right? The sort of what we maybe call the Midwestern dad lineup, Brandon, okay. Like little legs, little tiny defense,
sort of flat
and then exactly, and then super wide through the middle, and then bring things to a nice little point at the top with the Chiefs forward line.
What a picture!
Yeah, what a picture! Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'm not sure that's the right move. It's hard. Okay, I think the question is Haaland, and that's sort of its own question, because I think that if you put Haaland aside, I mean, as somebody who's had Watkins the last 3 weeks now, and I did get a goal from him last week, and so it hasn't been like a total disaster, but it's hard to make a strong argument for having even like Havertz, right? Like, when you can sort of, I don't know. It just feels like you can even see it in terms of just total points scored this season, right? The really are, like, the midfield is where the points are really coming from this year. And so, and it does feel like there are enough kind of mid-level forwards. I think the problem is they're just not super consistent, or they'll just like see like a massive dip in form. And whereas, a good, like a premium forward is going to be kind of fixture proof, right? They can sort of score in any fixture. Whereas I think some of these other forwards, it's a little, you kind of want them for like a nice run of home fixtures or something like that. And so, like, it can be done, like, to go super cheap, but it does require you to be the kind of fantasy manager that, like, does a lot of advanced planning and is kind of ruthless about dropping one 6 million forward for the other as soon as the fixtures turn, which can be hard to do, right? Because, like, if you have a forward and they've gotten 2 goals in their last 3 matches or something like that, it's hard for you to ever be like, okay, I'm sticking to my plan here. I'm going to drop him, and I'm going to target this other forward now.
Well, this topic comes up occasionally on the podcast, where you don't want to wake up one day in the near future and realize you have like half of your team is from bottom of the table
right
clubs.
Yep.
And that's my concern with just going with like a forward line like Alan's talking about here.
Yeah.
It can certainly work week to week, but I don't think that it totals up to, like advanced planning, as you say, and then really just being intentional about when you bring them in and when you get rid of them, and then the advantage of even somebody like Havertz. I would say I would use Ollie Watkins as my example of. It's frustrating when he blanks, but you know that Villa will be back with a vengeance any game week versus Wolverhampton. Once they face adversity, it's going to be a huge problem for your fantasy team.
Anything else, Brandon? Anything else you want to talk about on this week's pod?
Well, no. I don't have anything else I want to talk about. It's sort of a funny old season. Like, I think looking at the way the fantasy season has shaped up, I doff my cap to people excelling. It's like its frustration is also part of what is making this kind of a really interesting, and it's good for the game to be a challenge. And that sort of it should bring out the best in you, but it also should make you think a lot about what's happening in the actual Premier League, and don't lose sight of just like it's kind of a weird Premier League season, but also that's amazing. It's amazing to not know which team is going to win any given week. It's okay for the big clubs to not be trying to get 100 points in a season. I'm glad that we're not having a season like that.
No, I agree, and I think it's honestly made for a fun fantasy season as well. It's just been very swingy, So, but I think I'll take that over everyone having the same team every week, and I'll just sort of. It's like impossible to ever rise in a game week because everybody else.
And that I think is the way to answer Boston Prop's question about the ideal forward line. Is what a great opportunity we all have. Is just there is no right answer. There's like genuinely no right answer.
Right.
So do something fun and what feels good to you.
And make fantasy fun again doesn't mean you have to just like fling a dart at a board with players' names on it, right?
About it, right?
Exactly. You can like look ahead at fixtures and try to get there first, right? Try to get there ahead of some other people. That is not impossible to do. And hopefully this podcast can be helpful. Maybe next week's pod, what we can do is we can actually look ahead to a set of fixtures over the next few weeks and talk about that. Maybe we can cover that on a Patreon pod, Brandon. Speaking of, if you enjoyed this podcast.
What a segue.
Yeah, amazing, right? If you enjoyed this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating to get more Always Cheating podcasts. Very cheap, Brandon. Very affordable to support the podcast and help us continue this free pod every Sunday. So go to patreon.com/alwayscheating. And even the lowest pledge level, you get access to our Discord where you can talk about fantasy and many other things. So, Brendan, do you want to thank our producer patrons?
Yeah, thanks to producers Mike DePietro, Trevor Ingerson, Dave Wegner-Lodahl, our buddy Chris Howell, Andy Penn, Nick Wright, Lazaros Llanos, Jesse Halstead, Bruce Kerr, Brian Chin, Bobbas Kuhn, Ron Frost, Blair Jacobson, Todd Byerly, Andy Portlock, Dan Parsons, Terrence O'Donnell, Kerry Swanson, Jefferson Turner, as they does it, Francis Moore, Sam Shower, Craig Jackson, Caleb Robbie, Brian Clark, Thomas Tislov, Fro Jacobson, The Saint, Gareth H., Shalin F. Kadakia, Rishi Nigam, Noah and Louise, Travis Grant, Linus Vennerstrom, Matthew Skinner, Ben Coombs, Eric Kite, Rune Sandberg, the three Jims, James Murray Wood, James Seed, James Holland, Jack, and Craig at Total Maths Tutoring. Rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us wherever you get your social media. Our website is alwayscheating.com. And have fun watching EFL Cup matches. I've really been looking forward to this slate. Preston hosting Arsenal. You can't get enough.
Yeah. I guess there's no more Carabao. That was a one-time thing. Now it's just all EFL.
I think it is the Carabao Cup. They just don't say Carabao in the Foot Mob app. So
yeah, I got you. Yeah. You still call it the Milk Cup, don't you? Like a tribute to.
I just call it. I just call it Boys Plan.
Yeah, that's true. I call it the Johnstown Paint Cup, Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
I like this just totally different sponsor. Just throw it in there. All right, thanks everyone for listening. Patreon supporters, we'll see you on Thursday. Talk to you later. Bye.